David R. in Kansas says, what inflation rate are you currently building into your retirement plans?
All right, this is a complicated question, but it's critical because we see a lot of people that are building in inflation rates as they've seen inflation over the last decade. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 2.5%. I think that's suicide, right? So a core inflation rate is about 4%. That's what we're going to put in. But you have to think about inflation in terms of what are you inflating? Let's take healthcare for an example.
Right.
We're inflating healthcare at 6.5%.
Yeah.
And that might be too conservative.
Absolutely.
We may need to reflect inflation higher than that on healthcare costs. If you go into retirement with a mortgage, and let's say that your mortgage payment is $1,500 a month, and it's going to be that way for the next 10 years, and then it's paid off, there's no inflation on that $1,500 a month.
Right.
Okay. And you can look at how often are you going to replace vehicles, or what's the inflation on vehicles? How often are you going to, what are you going to do for travel, energy, those types of things? You should break that down in a budget, and you should inflate different expenses at different rates if you really want to get accurate about it.
But the base, you're saying the base that we run it in our plans is 4%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the amazing thing is, Chris, you know this as a certified financial planner, that if you run a plan at 4% and then you run that same plan at 2.5%, you're going to get totally different outcomes.
Yeah. And we always coach our clients to say, which, we want to plan. We want to be overly optimist when it comes to your retirement, but we want to be pessimist. We want to plan for the worst case scenario.
Exactly.
When it comes to planners.
That's what you have to do. That
Absolutely.
way we're prepared.
Yep. So Robert R. in Missouri says, has another question on inflation. So seeing inflation rising and bad Washington policy, how soon will you reallocate profiles? Also being retired, will you reallocate different than a 30-year-old who is building his portfolio?
Okay, so first of all, I want to direct Robert to, first of all, there's a link in the show notes here, and you're going to find a lot of different resources there. So there is a retirement plan checklist that talks about how to put inflation properly into your retirement plan. Also out there, through that link in the show notes, is an article, Lumber Commodities and Inflation Fears, where we wrote this article not too long ago, and it basically flies in the face of what mainstream is saying is this great inflation coming, because this inflation that we see is, we believe, temporary. So we don't think that inflation is really going to become a factor for probably another 2 or 3 years. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. But the bottom line is, we're not going to make a knee-jerk reaction to adjust a portfolio because of a couple of months of inflationary data. We need more information, and we need to be convinced that this is a longer-term issue. And inflation is one of those things that doesn't sneak up on you. You can see it coming.
You can read the tea leaves. Yeah,
you really can. But the other part of Robert's question is that we will reallocate the portfolios based on 2 different scenarios. Number one, if they get out of balance for where they need to be, and number 2, if the objective of your overall plan changes, that requires a change to that allocation. And obviously, the thing that we're looking to do is try to be as conservative as we possibly can and still maintain those goals. And we will always reallocate differently for somebody that's in retirement versus somebody that's 30 years old trying to grow their money.
Yep. Kevin G. in Kansas, what specific areas of a retirement plan will be impacted by potential inflation, and what approaches are best to hedge against these inflation impacts?
Okay, so we talked about inflation here just a little bit ago, Chris,
Yeah.
and essentially you want to look at all the different places where you're spending money and inflate those at different rates, and based on what those are inflating at, and you want to make sure that you're doing that as you're updating that plan throughout the years. Potential inflation hedges are stocks. Stocks are an inflation hedge. Real estate's an inflation hedge. Commodities are sometimes an inflation hedge. Land, those types of things. Depends on where the inflation is flowing. But what the best thing to do here in this instance, Kevin, is to build these higher inflation rates into your plan, and then we can look at what asset allocation from a historical perspective has been able to provide the best protection against that and be able to give you that increased income in the future.
Oh, that makes sense.
Starting your route to retirement.